I've always been the quiet one in the family, the one who sits back and watches everything unfold. Too afraid to speak up, but always noticing the little things that everyone else ignores. Growing up, I thought that being observant was my strength. That was before I realized that sometimes being the quiet one makes you the perfect target. Let me back up a bit and give you some context. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business, but no one ever really says anything directly. We had our tight-knit circle of neighbors, and most of them were good people, or at least that's what I thought, until things started to unravel. I'm in my late 20s now, and I've lived on my own for a few years after getting out of college. I'm not saying I'm rich, but I've made a decent life for myself. I don't owe anyone anything, and I've worked hard to build my career. I've always been independent, and I pride myself on being able to take care of myself. But my family, they've always expected something else from me. You see, there's this unspoken expectation in my family that we should all stick together, no matter what, no matter how toxic the relationships get, no matter how much we hurt each other. But I'm not like them. I've always wanted to break free, do things on my own terms. And for a while, that was working. Then everything changed. It all started when my mom called me one evening, her voice trembling. "Can you come over?" she asked. It wasn't an unusual request, but something about her tone didn't sit right with me. I didn't think much of it at first. I just figured it was one of those things where she needed help with something small, maybe a repair or advice about something at the house. But when I walked into her home that night, it was like stepping into a different world. My stepdad, Rich, was sitting at the kitchen table, his face red and tense. Amy, my half-sister, was nowhere to be seen. But I could tell from the looks on their faces that something had happened, something I wasn't supposed to know about. "You need to leave," my mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze. Leave? My own mother was asking me to leave her house. I tried to keep my cool, but I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening. "What do you mean, leave? What's going on?" It took a minute before she said anything, but when she did, her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Rich and Amy, they've been..." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I could see it in her eyes. The betrayal was so palpable in the room that I could almost taste it. I'd always known that things weren't perfect in our family, but this was a punch to the gut. I didn't know who to feel worse for, myself, for being caught in the middle of this mess, or my mother, for having to face it at all. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't stay here. Not in a house where secrets were kept like that. I could hear the distant echo of a broken family, each of us trying to hide the cracks in our lives while pretending everything was okay. I thought about leaving, just packing up and walking out, but the reality hit me harder than I expected. Amy and I had always been close growing up. Well, as close as any siblings can be, when their parents' marriage isn't exactly a picture of stability. But this was a betrayal that cut deep. What was I supposed to do? Stay and support my mother while she begged me to pick sides, or leave and let them all fall apart, knowing I'd be a part of that collapse? The tension in the room was unbearable, and I could feel the weight of their expectations hanging over me. It's funny how families can do that, make you feel like you owe them something, like you have to play a role in their drama, whether you want to or not. But that night, I made a decision. I had to break free. I wasn't going to get tangled in their mess. I wasn't going to let my life be controlled by their secrets and their lies. Little did I know, this was just the beginning, the calm before the storm. I didn't know what to say to my mom that night. I mean, how do you even respond when the people you've trusted your whole life, the people you've been raised to believe were good, turn out to be, well, not good? I wanted to scream, to call Amy, to get to the bottom of it right away, but I didn't. I just stood there, feeling like a ghost in my own skin. "I don't know what you expect me to do, Mom," I said finally, my voice a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. I could hear the edge in my words, but couldn't do much to soften them. "Do you want me to pick sides? You're asking me to leave because of them." She winced at my words, but I couldn't help it. There was a bitterness growing in me, an anger I couldn't bury. "I'm sorry. I don't want you to be part of this. I don't want you to have to deal with it." Her eyes were red, like she hadn't been sleeping for days. And honestly, I wasn't sure if it was grief or guilt that made her look so worn down. Maybe it was both. "You should talk to Amy," she added quietly, like she was handing me a bomb and expecting me to hold it together. She doesn't know how to deal with this. I'm not even sure she knows what she did." I felt the weight of her words settle in my chest, and for a moment, I didn't know whether to go after Amy or to let the whole thing burn. But it was clear from the look on her face that whatever was happening, she couldn't fix it. And somehow, I was left to pick up the pieces. The next morning, I called Amy. It felt strange, almost like I was calling a stranger. I mean, it had only been a few months since we'd hung out for Thanksgiving, and everything seemed normal then. But now, everything felt off, like there was a huge, invisible crack in the ground between us that was only just starting to show. She picked up on the first ring, her voice calm but distant. "Hey, what's up? Are you okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her response was clipped, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. "Yeah, of course. Just been busy." "Busy with what? What's going on with you and Rich?" There was a long pause. On the other end of the line, I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she processed my question. "Why would you ask me that?" she finally responded, her tone shifting. "Mom said something." "Yeah, she did," I replied, my voice harder than I intended. "She said you..." But I stopped myself. I wasn't going to put her on the defensive just yet. I wanted to know what was really going on, not start a fight. She sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Look, I don't want to talk about it over the phone. Can we meet up? I'll explain, okay? But just don't freak out." "Fine," I said, though my mind was racing. What was there to explain? Was this something I could even understand? We agreed to meet that afternoon. As soon as I hung up, I felt the walls closing in around me. I wasn't sure what I expected from Amy. We hadn't always been close, but we were family, right? So why did everything feel so fragile? I drove to the cafe we used to go to when we were kids, back before things started to get messy. The place still smelled like burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls, familiar in a way that almost made me feel like everything could be okay again. But as soon as I saw her sitting at the corner booth, looking smaller than usual, the sense of unease came rushing back. She looked up when I approached, her face unreadable, and I sat down across from her, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wanted to ask her a million things, but I bit my tongue. I needed her to talk first. Amy folded her hands on the table and exhaled slowly. "I'm not proud of what happened, okay?" she started, her voice trembling just a little. "But you have to understand, it wasn't like I planned it. It wasn't like I was trying to hurt Mom. It just happened." I felt my stomach drop. "You're talking about Rich, aren't you?" I could barely say his name without feeling sick to my stomach. Her eyes flickered down to the table, and she nodded slowly, confirming everything I feared. "God," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Why? Why him, Amy? Why would you do that?" "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It felt like I needed someone, okay? Someone who understood me, and Rich, he was there. It was just a stupid mistake, but it wasn't supposed to go this far. And now I don't know what to do." I could see the guilt on her face, the weight of it crushing her from the inside, but no amount of guilt could change what she had done. I wanted to be angry, but all I could feel was a strange mix of disbelief and pity. "But Mom," I started, but she cut me off. "I know. I've tried to apologize to her, but it doesn't matter. I can't take it back. I can't change what happened." And just like that, I realized the worst part of it all. This wasn't just about Rich. It wasn't even just about Amy. This was about something deeper, something no one had been willing to face for years. Our family secrets weren't just hidden away anymore. They were exposed, and there was no going back. I don't know what I was expecting from Amy, but it definitely wasn't that. Her words were like a heavy stone, sinking into my chest and twisting everything inside me. She wasn't sorry enough, wasn't guilty enough for what had happened. It was like she'd convinced herself that she hadn't done anything that couldn't be fixed, that this was just some sort of mistake that could be brushed under the rug. But I couldn't let it go. Not this time. I sat in that booth with Amy, staring at her like I was looking at a stranger. The sister I thought I knew, the one I grew up with, the one I laughed with over stupid inside jokes at family dinners. She was gone. In her place was someone who had betrayed everyone she loved. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to realize how deeply she'd cut. I felt my breath catch in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might explode. I'd never been one to hold grudges, to harbor anger for too long. But this was different. This wasn't some petty argument. This was the kind of betrayal that could ruin everything. "I don't know what to say, Amy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the words felt foreign coming out. "I never thought you'd do something like this. It's not just about you and Rich. It's about Mom. She doesn't deserve this. She's the one who's been taking the hit, and you don't get it, do you?" She flinched, but didn't respond right away. I could see the shame creeping up her neck, the way her eyes darted around, like she was looking for a way out. But there was no way out. Not for her. Not for me. We were all trapped in this, and it was only going to get worse. I took a deep breath, fighting the frustration building inside me. "Do you even realize what this is doing to her?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "She asked me to leave, Amy. She's pushing me out because of you and Rich. Do you understand that?" For a moment, there was only silence. Amy's fingers curled into fists, but she didn't look up at me. Her face was a mix of guilt and defensiveness, the kind of look that only comes from someone who knows they've done something irreparable but can't quite bring themselves to admit it. "I'm trying to make things right," she said, her voice small. "But it's hard, okay? Mom's not the same anymore. I don't know what to do. I need time. I need things to calm down." "Time," I repeated, the disbelief creeping back into my voice. "You think you have time? Time for what? To fix this? To fix everything you've broken?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't have an answer, because there was no easy fix. There was no quick apology that could make this right. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was that this wasn't just about Amy anymore. It was about everything. It was about the lies, the silence, the things we were all too afraid to confront. And now that the truth had come out, there was no putting it back in the box. It was too late for that. The anger inside me burned hotter now. "I don't know what I expected," I muttered, standing up and grabbing my purse. "I thought maybe you'd get it. Maybe you'd see how wrong this is. But I was wrong. You're not the sister I thought you were. You're not even the person I thought you were." I walked out of the cafe without looking back. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. But I couldn't stay there any longer. I couldn't be in the same room with her while the rest of my world was falling apart. My mind was a whirlwind, and I couldn't get my thoughts to settle. When I got to my car, I called my mom, my voice tight as I spoke. I saw her mom. I tried to talk to her, but I stopped, taking a breath. I don't think she gets it. I don't think she understands what she's done. My mom's voice, on the other end, was soft, but there was a note of finality in it. "I know, sweetheart, I know." It was as if she had already given up on Amy. The realization hit me hard. Mom had accepted the betrayal long before I did. She had already processed the loss in her own way, but I wasn't ready to. Not yet. When I got home that night, I sat in my apartment in silence, staring out the window. The sky was dark, the city lights flickering below, and everything felt suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to punch the walls until I couldn't feel anything anymore. But I didn't, because in some twisted way, I knew that nothing I did could change any of this. This wasn't just about a broken family. This was about my entire worldview crashing down. It was about realizing that the people who were supposed to be the most important to me, people I had trusted, people I had loved, had shattered everything I thought I knew, and I couldn't fix it. I didn't sleep much that night. The quiet of my apartment felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in around me, but I couldn't escape. I kept replaying the conversation with Amy in my head, trying to make sense of it, trying to find some thread of hope that I could pull to fix everything. But there was nothing. No matter how much I twisted and turned the situation, there was no clean break, no simple explanation, just a raw, jagged mess. I spent the next few days in a haze, avoiding phone calls and staying away from home as much as I could. My mom kept texting me, asking how I was doing, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I couldn't put into words what I was feeling, what we were feeling. My mind was racing, but at the same time, I felt frozen, like I was trapped in this weird limbo where nothing made sense anymore. And then, on the third day, I got the call that would change everything. It was from Rich. I stared at the name on the screen for a few seconds, half expecting it to be some kind of prank. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want anything to do with him. But I knew that if I didn't pick up, things would just keep spiraling, and I couldn't let that happen. Not when it felt like everything in my life was already out of control. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. "Hey, it's Rich," he said, his voice coming through the phone with a strange kind of hesitancy. "Look, I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear from me, but I think we need to talk." I wanted to hang up right then and there. I didn't want to hear his voice, didn't want to know what he had to say, but something in his tone made me pause. There was a desperation there, an urgency I couldn't ignore. "About what?" I asked, my voice colder than I meant it to be. "What could you possibly have to say that I haven't already heard from Amy? I know what you think of me, and I deserve it," he started, and I could hear him exhale sharply. "But I need you to understand something. I never wanted any of this. I never meant to hurt your mom, or you, or Amy." I could feel the anger rising again, but I kept my mouth shut, letting him finish. He went on to explain, to justify his actions. He talked about how things had been falling apart between him and my mom for years, how he felt neglected, how he thought Amy was the only one who understood him. The words tumbled out in a rush, like he was trying to explain away everything that had happened. But none of it made sense to me. It just sounded like excuses. "You don't get it, do you?" I snapped, cutting him off. "You broke everything. You don't get to stand there and tell me you didn't mean to hurt anyone. Because you did. You hurt everyone." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him breathing, as if he were trying to find the right words to say. "I know," he finally whispered. I'm sorry for everything, but I can't undo what I've done. All I can do is hope that maybe someday you'll understand, and maybe we can find a way to fix this. I don't know how, but we have to try." I could feel my chest tighten as I listened to him. The anger was still there, but now there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. Was it pity? Was it guilt? Maybe it was just the recognition that, in a strange way, I understood what he was saying. Not the excuses, but the pain underneath. The idea that people sometimes make mistakes so big, they have no idea how to climb out of the mess they've created. But that didn't mean I was ready to forgive him. Not now, not yet. "I don't know what you expect from me, Rich," I said, my voice quieter now. "I can't fix this. None of us can. You've crossed a line, and I don't know if there's a way back from it." There was another long silence, and then he sighed. "I get it, I do, but I had to try." And with that, he hung up. I sat there for a few moments, staring at the phone in my hand, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do with what I'd just heard. Maybe he was sincere, maybe he wasn't. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The family I had known, my mom, my stepdad, my sister, was gone. What was left was a hollow shell, a collection of people too broken to put themselves back together. A few days later, I went to visit my mom. She'd been calling and texting, and even though I didn't feel ready, I knew I couldn't stay away forever. I had to face it. I had to face her. When I got to her house, she was sitting in the living room. looking out the window like she was waiting for something. She didn't even look at me when I walked in. She just kept staring out into the yard. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. What could I say? Finally, she turned to face me, her eyes red and swollen, like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have handled this better. I should have protected you." I shook my head. "No, Mom, you didn't do anything wrong. This isn't on you." She nodded, but I could see the guilt still weighing on her. "I never wanted to drag you into this. I should have shielded you from it. You didn't deserve this." "I didn't deserve any of this," I said, my voice shaky but firm. "But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in what felt like forever, we just sat in silence together, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The hurt was still there, raw and exposed. But maybe, just maybe, we could start to heal. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew one thing for sure. We, the broken pieces of our family, were still here. And maybe that's all we had left. It's funny how life can go from being routine and predictable to completely shattering in what feels like the blink of an eye. In the aftermath of everything that had happened, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever get back to some semblance of normal. I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again, but maybe that was just my grief talking. Maybe this was just the beginning of something I didn't fully understand yet. Over the next few weeks, things with my family didn't get better right away. I wasn't expecting a quick fix. I think we were all just trying to survive the wreckage, putting one foot in front of the other, pretending we knew what we were doing. My mom, for her part, had stopped apologizing so much. She didn't need to anymore. It was like the guilt had become a permanent part of her expression. But she was there, and for the first time in years, it felt like she was truly present. It was as if she had finally given herself permission to stop holding everything together for the sake of appearances and just let things be messy. I admired her for that, but I knew she wasn't quite ready to forgive herself for what had happened. As for Amy, well, she didn't exactly make things easy. She stayed away for a while, letting the dust settle. I couldn't blame her for needing space, but it wasn't helping us. The silence between us was growing unbearable. I could feel it every time we passed each other in the hallway at Mom's house, or when she'd show up at family gatherings, her face tight and her eyes avoiding mine. I didn't know what to say anymore. What could I say? There was no easy way to pretend that things were fine when they were clearly anything but. It wasn't until I finally decided to take the first step, until I picked up the phone and called her, that I realized we weren't just fighting over the past. We were fighting for the future. A future that, at that moment, seemed uncertain and fragile, but one that was still worth trying to save. "Hey," I said when she picked up. I felt awkward, unsure how to begin. "I think we need to talk." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, like she was trying to find the right words too. "I know," she finally replied, her voice small but steady. "I've been thinking about calling you too." I didn't know what to say. "Me neither," I admitted, "but I think we need to fix this, Amy. For us. For Mom." I could hear her exhale deeply, like she was releasing a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. "I know," she said again, but this time there was a hint of relief in her voice. "I know, I don't know how to make it right, but I want to try." It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were still a lot of things left unsaid, a lot of hurt between us that we couldn't just brush off. But in that moment, I realized that trying was the most important thing. Maybe there was no magical way to undo the past, no quick fix for everything that had been broken. But there was the possibility of healing. Slowly, cautiously, we could start rebuilding the trust that had been shattered, one small step at a time. In the weeks that followed, we tried. I won't say it was easy or that we fixed everything overnight. It took time, lots of time, and patience. There were arguments, tears, and moments when I felt like giving up. But there were also moments when we laughed again, when it felt like we were finally, truly together again, despite everything that had torn us apart. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, and it never would be. I knew that, but it was real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were all finally facing the truth, no matter how painful it was. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. And that was enough for now. Looking back, I can see that the hardest part of all of this wasn't the betrayal or the pain. It was the fear that we wouldn't be able to move past it. The fear that we would be forever broken, forever stuck in a cycle of anger and resentment. But we didn't. We learned that forgiveness doesn't always come easy, and that healing isn't a straight line. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it takes years. But maybe, just maybe, we were starting to put the pieces back together. Story 2. It's time to raise a chair. Today, we have another exciting story for you in our lounge. Some folks, I suppose, express love in the lounge, in their own special manner these days. The boundless knowledge of a brother. I'm emotionally damaged as a result of changing my name. My 24-year-old male little brother and I have never gotten along, mostly because he is entitled and believes that he is the center of the universe. I grew up quite grounded, while my brother is a self-centered man-child, in large part because my parents have never gotten along. Since I've never liked the last name I was given, and I've always wanted my name to represent the family who raised me, I recently changed it to my mother's maiden name after having my dad's last name. My brother remarked, "Oh, so you don't want to be my sister anymore?" After learning that I had done this, my last name is that. You do not wish to be connected to me. I suppose we already know which side you're on. It's unbelievable that you would harm me like way. So you're saying that I should feel embarrassed by my name? Is that it? Did you ever consider the impact this would have on me? Funny enough, I said, I didn't even consider you. Oh no, my 25-year-old brother, who is 31 years old, has always been an entitled brat. He's resided at my home. It has been purchased and restored by my mom and me over the past 5 years. As if it were a huge favor, he made sure to rub it in my mom's and my face every month, even though he didn't start helping with the household costs until approximately 2 years ago. He always complains about how terrible he is living here and how terribly he is treated. My mother treats him like a prince, and the house is a complete mess. My mom and I used to store our materials and workstations in his room, which served as our studio. I work as a designer. My mother is an artist. We converted our living room into a temporary office for ourselves when he came in. Therefore, we have a variety of storage units in our living area where we keep our goods. My brother has constantly griped about how messy and disorganized the place is, how much he despises living here, etc. He doesn't have to live here if he doesn't like it. I've told him over and over, since he is family, and family members should respect one another, he suggested that I make accommodations for him instead. We were making the most of the limited space in our little home. However, he claims that the fact that we don't even have room for a couch and TV is shameful. He moved in 2 months ago, we used to say. He said that he could no longer live this way and that he would have to move in with his fiancée for asking him to assist with the expenses and having the gall to work in the living room. My mother and I are simply so terrible. He has not packed a single box since telling us this, and he won't give me a time estimate. However, I heard him tell his father that he plans to move out in September. I found a lot of stuff when I got home today, including food and sodas, from the kitchen piled up in my room and on my desk, where I kept my laptop and my design drawings. I feared they had been crushed, which left me perplexed and irritated. I inquired whether my mother did it. It was my brother, she said. I didn't like his shifting my things and perhaps destroying my job. So I went to ask him why in the world he done that. He bragged about how he finally cleaned up after making an executive decision. He has the biggest bedroom and his own bathroom, both of which are filthy, which made me chuckle. He determined that my mother's and my belongings should be kept out of the communal areas and assigned to our own areas, the dining room and kitchen. None of his food or beverages were removed from the kitchen because he reasoned that since I'm the only one who uses particular sodas and snacks, they should be kept in my room. anything that didn't belong in the common area, in his opinion. He simply threw them in my mother's chambers and on her desk in a mound. Be aware that his luggage, moving boxes, and shoes are scattered over the corridor. Every time my mom and I pass his room, we have to step over his trash without moving anything. I informed him that we must respect our belongings and personal space. It's not for me to dictate, he added. Yes, it is, I said. It's my home. He wouldn't consider it, though. I had to thank him for cleaning up my mess. He yelled at me. Then I had best say I'm sorry for being so unappreciative. I reminded him that he was leaving. So why should he care so much about the appearance of my house? He lost his mind and said, "How effing dare you?" when I informed him that I couldn't plan anything until he moved out. I suppose you're eager for me to go. Not everything I say and do is a personal attack on him, I said, rolling my eyes. He was yelling at me, accusing me of mistreating him by exploiting my power trip. At that moment, I lost my temper and left because I was tired. Making expectations and establishing rules in someone else's house that don't appear to apply to him requires a very naive individual. For individuals who claim there is no need, the entitlement was expanded. I won't go into the history of ultimatums and eviction threats, but the main idea is that a mother loves her kid too much to turn him away. I appreciate it, even though I don't understand it, because I adore her. In addition, he had been considering leaving for a while. I only allowed him to stay for those reasons. In addition, I recently graduated from graduate school and am beginning to accumulate money for a home of my own. Edit. The home will be entirely mine if and when my mother dies. That's why I won't sell it or lose my investment. His reasoning is scattered throughout. He becomes irate when the rules don't apply to him because he wants to establish rules and a house that isn't hers. The fact that he refuses to accept responsibility for his acts while simultaneously expecting appreciation for inexplicable things is also quite annoying, like tidying up your belongings while ignoring his own mess. Hopefully, when he leaves, a schedule that suits everyone may be established. Update: I-31 females gave my entitled brother what he deserved at last. I'm shocked by the altercation between my mom and a woman in her 60s. Am I entitled, brother? A 26-year-old man has been taking advantage of my mother and me. The residence has been co-owned by her and myself since 2017. For 4 years, he lived without paying rent. In the end, my mother was able to make him pay his rent by having him pay a total of around $450 every month since 2021 for various utility bills. He has never voluntarily paid his debts, as if my mom were attempting to con him. He wants documentation of the expense and an explanation for why he must pay the amount each month. Additionally, each time he has finally provided us with the funds to pay the bills, he has claimed to be helping us out. We must be broke after all, otherwise we would be forcing him to pay for us. He has been ranting lately about how he wants to save money to move out and how he can't wait to leave the house, but he just can't handle the burden of all these debts. My mother informed him that she would be happy to cover his share of the expenses because he is so serious about moving out. He would just have to pay his auto insurance, and she works on a seasonal basis. She promised to let him save as much as he could until May 31st. Since that arrangement was formed, up until the bureau had taken 2 out-of-state travels, he would then have to move out. One was a bachelor party that lasted 4 days. Every time he enters the house, New Orleans leaves a greasy mess, has attended several poker sessions with his pals, and won't even wash a dish. My mom has been working 6 days a week to earn enough money to pay for his expenditures in the meanwhile. Nevertheless, Untitled Bro has. Every time she requested him to complete the most basic chore, I gave her a single thank you. No matter how frequently she reminds him, he either ignores her or says he forgot. She finally lost it today. He never paid her the one bill he was accountable for, which was due 4 days ago. She repeatedly reminded him directly and by text. He eventually replied by asking her to provide him with a receipt so she can confirm the amount of his insurance. which she said it cost. But he never paid the money. She inquired via text one final time today. She lost it and declared that she was tired of providing for him without even saying thank you. She said that he was no longer worth the trouble she endured and that she wanted serenity. He no longer has till the end of May to get out, she stated, and she will remove him from the auto insurance tomorrow. He has 3 weeks, that's all. She had previously threatened to evict him, but she hasn't done so yet. However, this time seemed different since I had never witnessed her act so entitled and nuclear. Since you went through the 5 stages of grieving almost 100 times during that dispute, your brother must have felt the same way. He called, yelled, wept, called names, and attempted to drag me in to protect himself. He then attempted to drag his father away for 2 hours to defend himself, tried to protect him by calling my mother's sisters, claimed that obtaining his own insurance was a strain on his emotions. She says she needs treatment from a professional since she is clearly insane and doesn't care about him. If otherwise, why would she so ruthlessly deny people access to such precious resources? She didn't move while he continued to talk for 3 hours. This is the closest she has gone to evicting him, and I don't want to get my hopes up that she will meet the 3-week deadline. I'm hoping that this will frighten him away before she needs to provide an update. That is, until little brother told me he was going to take my dog for 3 days without my consent. For those of you who haven't heard my story, I'm a 31-year-old woman with a 26-year-old brother who lives with us. My mother is coming with me. He has until May 31st to vacate, according to my mother. I've been trying to buy myself some time as I wait tensely for him to go. However, I've finally run out of options, and I'm not sure what the straw or the length that broke the camel's back was. While I was sleeping last night, my brother told me that he would be taking my dog for a 3-day fishing trip. He couldn't possibly do that, I informed him. I wasn't asking, he said. He told me. He said that since he is also my dog, he has the right to take him whenever he wants. But here's the deal. My brother insisted on getting a puppy 9 years ago. I pleaded with my mother not to. He once owned one, but he mistreated it, and my mom had to find a new home for it. He never told her the end of it. Naturally, though, she gave in. The title dude didn't care for the spot, and the same issue continued. When he had to move in with relatives, and they told we couldn't bring a dog and title, it all came to a head. I ended up taking over his care, paying for his vet expenses, feeding him, getting him to get groomed, etc. Bro made no effort to locate a new residence. I was the one with the issue. After my college studies ended, I found a foster home where I could visit him every day. 2 years later, when we had a place to live again, I was able to get him back. Furthermore, Spot relocated with me when I left my home for a year. Spot has my name on all of his records and sleeps with me every night. He has arthritis and is 11 years old. He needs regular restroom breaks and takes medication for his stomach and hips. He despises the water, too. Little bro was telling me that I knew the place would be terrible and potentially in agony the entire journey when he claimed he wasn't asking. He is due for a refill on his medications tomorrow because he has never inquired about or even discussed taking them. I would have received the refill sooner if I had known. Spot needs a lot of care, I tried to tell him, but he answered, "Just give me everything you need," and I was really annoyed. "You don't tell me this till the previous evening." He then uttered something that chilled me to the bone. I was being kind, but I might have just stolen him and left you in a panic. Letting you know in advance. It was that. I have no idea why, but all of my alarms went off. After putting on my slippers and grabbing my handbag, I instructed Spot to get into the car. Last night, I drove up to my fiancé's place. This summer, I was planning to move into my fiancé's house, but now I'm wondering why I'm waiting so long. Reddit users are often asking me why I stay at home, and at the moment, I am unable to recall any of my previous justifications. At the moment, my mother is not involved. I'm relieved because I honestly don't give a damn about her opinions. I can't just accept the entitled pro's little power trips, even if I know she doesn't want me to. He is free to alter the residence any way he pleases, making punctures in the walls, kicking the appliances, referring to the house as a dump. But when he takes my dog without my consent, I say no, my baby is that. Furthermore, I won't just watch him do anything he wants with my cat. I told him no outright, something he hardly ever does. Yes, since he doesn't work till the afternoon, I have periodically requested my brother to allow me take a restroom break. He always responds that he is too busy to do so. I have no reason to believe that he will take care of my dog for even a few hours, much less 3 days, while we are fishing. Edit. The brother is unaware of his fiance's residence, and even if he did, the 2 enormous German dogs would eat him. Your sibling is a walking catastrophe, oh boy. He genuinely believed he could just tell you that he was removing your dog. Thank you for drawing the line at last. This man-child is an expert at going too far. The last straw was that. I can't decide which is more startling. How long did it take you to become tired of him? His insolence in claiming any ownership of your dog. He has been treating you and your mother like personal servants for years. It's crazy that at age 26, he's still acting like way. The last update. I want to start by expressing my gratitude to everyone for their good wishes, support, and for contacting me to see how I'm doing. Knowing that so many of you would have responded to my predicament in the same way naturally was such a comfort. I've finally got an update for everyone after many months. All in all, my brother has finally left home. But it wasn't until the end of July that he moved out. My mother gave him permission to postpone the move-out date twice, even though it was originally set for May 31st. Although I wasn't happy, I couldn't let it bother me since I moved out suddenly in April. I was concentrating on creating a secure environment for myself. My mother has made the house her own since my brother moved out, and I'm happy to report that it is now all she had dreamed it would be. Now that Untitled Bro isn't occupying too much of her space, the house appears spotless. She always has something new to show me when I come, and she takes great pride in all of her home renovation efforts. She seems very content. I'm only worried about the unusually amiable behavior of the entitled bro with her since he moved out. Later, more on that. Since we moved in with my fiancé and his 2 German shepherds, Spot is doing really well, even though I believe his dogs are aware that Spot is older and not as athletic as them. He still makes an effort to keep up with them. After moving in, Spot's favorite activities are eating the small, delicious nuggets that the chickens leave in the large yard, racing about it, and lounging in the sun. The chicken crap, that is. I apologize for the wait, but if you've gotten this far and are wondering why it took me so long to update, I have a good explanation. I purchased our first house with my fiancé. We had been working on renovating the tiny house in our dream neighborhood since we fell in love with it. We moved in last month, which I'm really happy to report. If that wasn't enough, I have more news for you. This is the most important announcement ever. We were married. We knew the house was the ideal location for our wedding, after all the effort we had put into it. In our living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture, we held a brief ceremony after inviting his father, his siblings, and my mother. It was ideal, but without some entitled bro stories, this post wouldn't be about entitled people. A few of the highlights are listed here. For want of a better word, this is what I've been dealing with for the past 3 to 4 weeks after moving out since my last post. All in all, my brother kept asking me where my dog was, again and again. I chose to ignore him. He said several extremely telling things while I was mute, though, including, "I bet you won't bring Sport back because you're afraid I'll do the same thing to you," implying leaving on a Spot. I wanted to point out the whole reason I felt the need to remove Spot was because he threatened to take my dog without my permission. But I didn't waste my breath. At one point, he got so worked up that he'd said, "Fine, don't tell me where Spot is, I'll find out," which only solidified my confidence that I made the right choice. A couple of months ago, he had information that I needed in order to help our aunt with a task. My aunt asked him to please send me the info so I could complete the task for her. He said he would, but he never sent me anything despite how many times he reminded him. It got to the point where the deadline was getting close, so I had to call and text him multiple times. He refused to give me anything, saying I needed to apologize for being so rude because I had the audacity to ask him for the info. I then asked my cousin Molly to text him, saying she was the one to contact instead. He sent the info to her instantly, and I had Molly for the info out of me. The look on his face when he later found out I was the one who took care of everything for my aunt was priceless. He enjoys having things held over my head. The final thing I will mention is entitled Bro was a nightmare for my mother until the day he moved out. He went through waves of giving my mom the silent treatment, then aggressively hounding her for wrecking his life to have personal pity parties and stating things like he was so miserable that he didn't want to live anymore. My mom was so frustrated up that on his moving out day, she had no empathy for him anymore, just secondhand embarrassment. But then he did something incredibly unusual. He was actually in the middle of ranting at her and blaming her for all of his failings when he suddenly broke down and wept, claiming he was sorry for what he put her through. All he wants is to be loved by his mom and sister, and asked, "What would you do if I murdered myself?" My mom stated she felt it was a miracle from God, and I attempted to gently question her if it wasn't more possible that it was just a manipulative ploy. She stated she is choosing to believe that this is a sign that her kid is finally turning for the better. I find that extremely hard to believe. So now he acts as if he was never the demon spawn that haunted our family for 8 years. And my mom is really thrilled because she feels that now her son has rehabilitated. I think it's more probable that he's just trying to stay in her good graces, since he wants to use her as a safety net. My mom insists she would never take him back in unless it was a serious emergency, but I don't know about that. That is the one thing about internal bro that makes me nervous to this day. Apart from that, I don't want to interact with him, and I won't include him in anything. My family members are aware not to give him my address, and he does not have it. But during the past few months, I've had to cope with a lot of drama. I'm so glad I escaped my chaotic home life at that time. It wouldn't have been a place or a secure place for me if I hadn't. I wouldn't have married the kindest, most encouraging man I've ever encountered. And I wouldn't have a house of my own at last with someone who truly loves me. With my husband at my side and my sweetie resting his head on my lap, I am extremely thankful for the opportunity to write this joyful update from the comfort of my home's couch. Once again, I appreciate your support and your patience while I waited for an update. I hope the wait was worthwhile. Thank you. Although it might be difficult to acknowledge when someone we love is taking advantage of us, even when we are aware of it, your mother's response makes sense. However, I believe that you are entirely correct to follow your gut in this situation. Don't allow anybody pull you back into that toxic dynamic. Instead, keep defending your peace. Is your sibling similar like this? Tell us in the comments section below. And we appreciate you coming to our lounge today. To ensure you don't miss our next video, please press the notification bell, like, and subscribe. Till the next occasion. Additionally, kindly return your chair to its original location. Story 3. It's time to raise a chair. In the lounge today, we have another fantastic story for you. In our lounge today, some decaying limbs are shaken away from this family tree. The free ride is finished. When I didn't support my sister's wedding, Mom interrupted me. I evicted her and reclaimed my home. I can't stand my mom being a pain in my ass. Not even for a moment. Her demands are increasing daily, and I've finally had enough. I want to run a sanity check before making some major changes. I don't want to do something that I'll come to regret. In order to support my 37-year-old sister, Ellie, my mother wants me to be 42. Women, a second marriage. Why? Since I inherited all of my father's fortune. He had a motive for doing so as well. He doesn't care if he's dead or alive. So why would he donate a penny to someone who doesn't care? My mom has always been a selfish individual who seldom gave a damn about my dad or myself. Ellie was the only person she cared about. With all of her needs and desires met, Mom treated her as if she were the center of the universe. And that was far more than your normal bias. It was an addiction that consumed everything. Ellie's underweight and fragility at birth were the first causes. However, she had the most stunning face that could warm anyone's heart. Even after she became well and grew up, and even after she got married, my mom's overbearing concern for her persisted. Any small annoyance Ellie encountered would be promptly resolved by my mother, who never allowed her to accept responsibility or handle the fallout. If Mom didn't feel like finishing her homework, she would finish it. She was unable to pass her high school course because of this, as her mother always protected her. She was so reliant on her mother that she didn't begin eating independently until she was in middle school. Mom used to feed her with her hands till that point. It wasn't until she married at age 26 that she left the house. Mom didn't leave her alone even after that. 4 or 5 times a day, she would give her a call. Her mother needed to know what she ate and what she dressed on the date night in order to check on her. I became less noticeable the more attention Ellie received. Not that my mother completely ignored me. She continued to support me as a child, but I always came in third place, behind her and my sister. My dad and I were not as important to my mother as she was. My dental visit wasn't as vital as her salon session. Because her spa appointment lasted longer than expected, she frequently forgot to pick me up from school. The sole bright spot was my father. He could see what was happening, and we shared a unique relationship. He would secretly take me out for ice cream or give me an additional allowance during our quiet times together to make me feel appreciated and recognized. However, Dad wasn't home often because he was a hard worker. My mom and I did all we could to encourage him to become closer to Ellie when he was. In hindsight, I saw that my mother was preparing Ellie to be totally reliant on her, guaranteeing that she would always require her. I got so tired of living in her shadow that I moved out of my parents' house throughout high school. I acquired a job, finished college, and established a life away from home. Dad made care to stay in contact, called or texted me frequently to see how I was doing, and even took a plane to see me whenever he had free time. Sometimes, if Mom spotted my Facebook post, she might text me on birthdays or during festivals. Before everything changed, everything was going well. Dad became very ill 11 years later. It started off feeling like a typical cold and flu and didn't go away. For months, he worked and lived with that condition, but he didn't take it seriously. Mom, too, was never interested in pressuring him to be checked out. He was diagnosed with a serious lung infection when his cough became intolerable. When we learned, I was working in a different city, so I hurried home. I was devastated to see him laying in his room by himself, while Mom and Ellie went to have their nails done. When he saw me, he broke down. Mom just spent a few minutes each day seeing him when he was in the hospital for a week. She might have provided him with companionship because she is unemployed, but she has a very busy calendar with beauty and fitness appointments. The hospital assigned a nurse to him after he was released 2 days ago. Mom literally had no choice but to give him her attention, and she found it to be very difficult. She seemed astonished to see me when she got there. I blocked her, even though she came to me for a strong embrace. For leaving town by myself in the house, I lost my editor. We went to get groceries, she said. She told me a falsehood. Their appearance made it clear that they had just left a spa treatment. By that time, Ellie was living with her mother after being divorced. The duration of her first marriage was hardly a year. It wasn't as though Mom didn't have any feelings for Dad. She did. She wasn't bad, but she obsesses on herself. She and Ellie came first, then everyone else. She was preoccupied with her own affairs. She would sit next to Dad, but she would be preoccupied with talking to Ellie, publishing tales, or taking care of her skin. She wouldn't interfere with your everyday schedule and would leave everything to the nurse. Even though I was only there for a week, I couldn't leave my dad alone because of his illness and my mom's carelessness. I returned to work after a week, but I was unable to accept that he needed me. I soon learned that he was in critical condition. Citing my dad's medical emergency, I quit my job right away and returned home. I requested Mom and Ellie to support me as I took on the role of primary caretaker. We were all supposed to band together and help him get through his treatments. Mom was careless, but she made an attempt. If she went out to retrieve Dad's oxygen cylinder, she would fail to give him his medication on time. She would to the salon and return after around 4 to 5 hours. I had to obtain another till then. Mom handled it as if it were a brief inconvenience and that he would quickly get back on his feet. Ellie, who was 2 years old, seldom ever went to his room because she said it was too emotionally taxing for her. During one of his worst bouts, she even spent a few weeks on vacation with her friends. As a result, I found myself at his side, looking after him and making sure he had company. When his condition deteriorated, Mom started to take care of him, but it was too late. The silent rage that had been building inside of me for years was stoked by seeing him decay in that hospital room. I thought they may have been able to rescue him if he had been examined sooner. I was devastated when Dad passed away. On the day of his funeral, I left home and never returned. His lawyer got in touch with me after he passed away and delivered me his will, which said that my dad had left me everything: the home, his funds, his fortune, and nothing for Mom or Ellie. I couldn't speak. I had no idea that he would become my mother and completely abandon me. Even though I knew he loved me, he likely witnessed their treatment of him in his last days, and this was his way of letting me know that he had taken note. The will, of course, caused a conflagration. Ellie and my mother were furious. When the lawyer revealed the will to them, Ellie actually yelled at him, claiming that her father could never harm her in this way. Dad had made it clear that I would be the only beneficiary of his inheritance, so the lawyer immediately put an end to that. Ellie was angry with me, but she didn't challenge the will. "I hope you'll share the inheritance with us," Mom said over the phone. In light of that, I blocked her. It was years before I spoke to her again. I couldn't handle it because I was too exhausted. She made every effort, but I interrupted her and never answered. Without telling my mother anything, I moved back to the city where I work, got a job, fell in love with my coworker, got married, and moved abroad with him. I gave birth to a child 3 years ago. My mother wanted to be involved in my daughter's life and apologized when she came to my house. "I've been living with guilt ever since he left," she said. "I had no idea your dad was truly passé." She would have stopped grooming herself and claimed that it no longer piqued her interest if I had known and spent more time with him. However, it also has to do with the fact that she misplaced her ATM card, and salon visits are costly. She cried and said, "Dad, all I really want is to be a part of my daughter's life." I gave her an opportunity. For a while, it was cool. She would frequently text me to see how she was doing and make a video call to see my kid. It ended quickly, and she began to hint at her financial difficulties in the hopes that I would give her money, but I refused to give in. Let's skip ahead to a month ago. My mother gave me a call. She sounds happy, even ecstatic, which is uncommon. Knowing that this could only mean one thing, I prepared myself. She wanted something, and I was right. She told me Ellie was getting married again and went on about how much this wedding would meant to Ellie after her traumatic first marriage. Then she drops the bombshell. She expects me to pay for the wedding. I was taken aback. First of all, Ellie and I weren't on speaking terms. Second, Dad's will. She made it clear that she considered me some kind of villain, the greedy sister who stole her inheritance. She hadn't once sought out to check on me or maintain any pretense of a connection. Mom was startled when I refused her down. "How could you not agree to this? You didn't split the fortune with her. She accepted her fate. But paying for her wedding is something you should bank cheerfully volunteered, irrespective of the inheritance things. As an elder sister, don't you have any responsibility?" I was shocked by her remark. Like, what the hell? Mom wants me to take on the role of older sister. even though she has never attempted to foster a sibling attachment between us. What a piece of shit. I made it very obvious to her that I would not be covering the cost of the wedding. She lost it, claiming that I was responsible for everything and that Standard had abandoned me. She went on a rant about her family's responsibilities, how I was stealing their wealth, and how Ellie deserved to be happy. I claimed to know nothing about anyone. What options do we have now? She remarked in a deceptive manner. Tell me. She has already paid the nominal fee to reserve the space and hire musicians and decorations. Everything. The location and venue are included in the invitation. From here, how do we return? When I heard this, I went crazy. I was supposed to pay for a wedding that I wasn't even invited to. Observe her boldness. She acknowledged that it was screwed up and that I should have been invited once I brought this up. She doesn't say anything and leaves. We assumed you would be preoccupied with the child. With a baby that little, the voyage is lengthy. We kind of skipped it because of jet lags and other issues. And since you might not be interested, we would be overjoyed if you could attend. To attend your sister's wedding, you don't require an invitation, do you? Come on over. Having everyone around would be entertaining. In between, I interrupted her. Plastic words are not necessary for me. I recognize the faces. Since the invitation has already been sent, she begged me to preserve the reputation, declaring that I would not pay them a single cent of my father's hard-earned money. I hung up the phone. I assumed she would stop bothering me, but she persisted in her deceptive voicemails and texts. She also said that it could be better for her to cut off communication with me and appear as though she only had one kid if I didn't cooperate. You see, her presence in my life is irrelevant to me. No, I don't. However, I'm tired of her persistent pestering. I want to hold her accountable for her foolishness. Despite what she had done to my dad, I allowed her to live in the house. I believe it's time for her to pay for her deeds. I have conflicting feelings about sending her an eviction notice. According to my spouse, if I wish to follow through on my decision, I should be prepared to face criticism from others. It is frowned upon in our culture to throw away your mother from the home she has occupied for 45 years. People would be quick to judge me harshly, even if they didn't want to get into the specifics. Is making her homeless too harsh? What are your thoughts? It is evident from your father's will that he understood the circumstances and wanted to leave his estate to the one person who genuinely cared about him. You. That is an impactful remark, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. He had complete understanding of your family's dynamics when he made his decision to divide the inheritance. Although evicting her is a difficult decision, you are not doing cruelly. If you decide to follow through, you're establishing a boundary. Be ready for criticism from people who are unaware of the whole situation. But anyone who really understands what you've gone through would sympathize. You are quite entitled to preserve your tranquility and your father's heritage. One update. All right. So many of you have been wondering why I allowed them to occupy the house for 10 years. To be honest, when my father passed away, I wasn't prepared to handle the drama. I was devastated emotionally. I needed to organize a lot of items. My career took a hiatus. I was a 32-year-old woman who had recently lost the most significant person in her life. I was unmarried, unemployed, and naive. I so rushed back to take charge of my life. After leaving things as it was, I also had the chance to relocate abroad. Throughout that procedure, I never turned around again after that. I think it's time to take care of any outstanding business. I thus had her evicted. I had no choice but to leave her. After I barred her from all accounts, she sent me emails that made my life miserable. She even threatened to disown me if I didn't cover the cost of his wedding. She would think I was dead. When Ellie joined the fleet, she called me all kinds of names. They said I had deliberately placed myself in front of my father to play on his emotions. It was a ridiculous charge, not because I wanted to inherit anything, but because I loved my dad. I took care of him. It was more than I could handle. I had suppressed my rage for years while I watched them ignore me and take advantage of my father. I thus made the decision to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I served her with a notice to vacate the house. After that, my mother lost her mind. She was shocked that I would do that. At first, she was incredulous. "No one can evict me from my husband's house," she said. "I've spent 45 years here. How could you think at all? I'll let it go so effortlessly." "Where were you when your spouse most needed you?" I asked, occupied with having her nails done. "Yes, exactly." I informed her that although she was free to do what she pleased, I would not compromise. She softened and confided in me about her sensitivity when she realized I was determined about my choice. "Where do I go with this age?" she asked. "How am I going to survive on my own? I've been making ends meet by renting half of the property and receiving the pension. Where would I go if you kicked me out?" "It's not my problem," I said. "Request that your golden kid look after you." I gave her 30 days to go, and I don't care where you go from here. Mom recognized she was wrong to accuse me of paying for Ellie's wedding. She immediately withdrew her expectations and added, "It's okay if you don't want to pay for the wedding. We can get by without it. Don't evict me though. Please return it." I said that I would not be rescinding the notice or paying for the wedding. "Everything that belongs to me will be mine. You're berating me and taking advantage of me for financial gain, even though I allowed you to reside there for 10 years. I was never important to her. Why should I give a damn about her now? She spent her entire life spoiling her golden kid. Why is she begging in front of me now? Her only daughter is competent of caring for her, isn't she?" My statements seemed to have less ego damage. She also instructed Mom to move in with them and leave the house as soon as possible. She has been bragging in public that she doesn't need my favor and that she would take care of her mother. On the 26th day, Mom left the house to remodel it and list it for lease. I engaged an agency. Only a week has passed since then. The family and relatives group is buzzing over Ellie's decision to shift her wedding from a lakeside location to a municipal hall. To be honest, I don't care that I haven't heard anything about her from her or anybody else. If anything, this circumstance shows how much they misjudged you. Second update, I have some news. Since the eviction, Ellie has been staying with my mom. There was more family turmoil to come. I just learned that Ellie's husband wasn't really happy about his mother being with them for an extended period of time. He was tired of my mother interfering all the time. Ellie's husband was already furious because she had squandered so much of his money on the venue and other expenses. He apparently never wanted a large wedding, but Ellie persuaded him by promising to have me cover the majority of the costs. But when she failed, they had to call it quits, which embarrassed him and his family because they had to move the location and send out the invitation again. In addition, Ellie brought her obtrusive mother home. Would anyone want that? A nosy aunt told me that Ellie's husband had threatened to divorce her unless she got Mom out. I was very certain that my mother would contact me after hearing this. After a few weeks, my mother contacted me once more, saying she had nowhere to go. She cried, saying that if I didn't do the right thing and let her back into the house, she would have to remain in a shelter. "I'm just an old woman with no one left," she said, in an attempt to be sympathetic. Although the property was no longer accessible, I apologized to her for her predicament. My friend's brother had already moved in after I rented it to him. She yelled over the phone that blood is thicker than water and that I was leaving her. "This is what I wanted to say," I said, "for many years. Perhaps you wouldn't be in this situation if you and Ellie had shown a modicum of respect for Dad. Who knows? If you had taken care of Dad, he could still be alive today." The individual began to ignore himself, and his health declined as a result of your extreme disregard for him, to flee the poisonous behavior of his wife. He never gave his health a second thought and devoted himself to his career. I cried for hours after hanging up the phone. I'm not sure why, but I was missing my dad a lot that day. Some family members contacted me to express their shock at my leaving my mother without a place to live. They pleaded with me to pardon her and return the house to her. I refused to back down and severed all ties with those who attempted to do so. I was tired of being their safety net after everything they had done to me. In the end, Mom moved in with a distant relative for a short while, but she is not wanted there. I've heard that she intends to attempt to coerce some other family members into taking her in. But she's burnt so many bridges that she doesn't have many left. I don't care if some people believe I went too far. My peace of mind, my inheritance, and the house. I owed it all to my father, who saw me and appreciated me after years of devotion and affection. I'll treasure that memory and at last let it go. I can rest easy knowing that I acted in my own best interests. Why would I allow them to use a penny if he didn't trust him with their money? They're not worthy, are they? It demonstrates how entitled and out of touch they were, that they relied on you to pay for her lavish wedding without even talking to you. It is hardly surprising that her spouse became impatient. You're perfectly justified in standing your ground when your mother tries to manipulate you with guilt and small-minded techniques. Her actions during and after your father's death reveal a great deal about her priorities. You don't have to clean up the mess she and Ellie made. Opie, you're correct. They are not worthy of being sent. If you were Opie, how would you respond? We appreciate you coming to your lounge today. To ensure you don't miss our next video, please press the notification bell, like, and subscribe. Till the next occasion. Additionally, kindly return your chair to its original location.